Social conflict theory can help us understand how the US educational system can disadvantage some people while giving advantages to others, so that schools ultimately play a role in reinforcing inequalities. In a pure meritocracy, two kids who work equally hard and have the same raw talent should do equally well, no matter what neighborhood they grew up in, no matter their race or gender, and no matter their class standing. On the surface, it might seem like the US has a meritocratic school system, but educational measures of merit, like grades or SAT scores, don't always measure everyone's talents consistently. Grades don't just measure an individual student's effort or ability. They're also influenced by many factors outside of the student's control, like the quality of their school or their access to resources like books or computers. This is where social conflict theory comes into the story. Social conflict theory helps explain how our educational system can both cause and perpetuate class differences. In the United States, there are large class gaps in educational attainment. While 83% of students from high-income families enroll in college after high school, only 63% of low-income students do. So why the disparity? One reason is that wealthier kids tend to live in higher-income neighborhoods, which in turn fund better quality schools. This makes it easier to get into college. In the US, school funding is determined at the local level. While federal and state governments provide some support to school districts, most of the money comes from local property taxes, meaning that schools in towns with more expensive houses and higher earning residents have more resources. And these differences in school quality translate to differences in outcomes for students. We know this because of research like a recent study done by American economists Kirabo Jackson, Rucker Johnson, and Claudia Persico. They found that increasing school funding levels by 10% was associated with students earning 7% higher incomes as adults. And this is only one of many studies that show that access to better quality, better funded schools makes kids more likely to go to college. So is money the answer? If we just give schools more money, will that be enough to fix the class differences in educational attainment? Well, yes and no. Even if school funding was the same everywhere, students whose parents have the time, money, and knowledge to support education in the home will have a step up on students whose parents don't have the time or resources to pass on cultural capital. Children from different class backgrounds are also exposed to different expectations about the path that their lives will take. If you grow up in an upper middle class neighborhood where your parents and all your friends' parents have college degrees, you're much more likely to expect that you'll go to college too, and you'll prepare accordingly. But for people whose parents didn't go to college, expectations for attending college may be lower. It may also be much harder to navigate applications for college, understand how the financial aid system works, or register for courses, all distinct barriers to attending college. This specialized knowledge is a form of cultural capital. And the US education system doesn't just contribute to class gaps in educational achievement. We also see persistent achievement gaps by race in the US, and they're made worse by elements of our education system that advantage white students. First, most teachers and school administrators are white, which has important implications both for the curriculum that students are taught in schools and how students are evaluated. A recent study of a nationally representative sample of American students found that Black students with the same standardized test scores as their white classmates were less likely to be nominated for gifted programs if they had a non-Black teacher. Another way that minority students end up being sorted into lower academic tracks are through standardized test scores. Standardized tests are a topic of great contention due to concerns about teachers teaching to the test and not teaching a full, broad curriculum. And most standardized tests are made and tested on the dominant group in society, the white middle class. Critics of standardized testing often cite cultural bias as part of the reason that we see gaps in test scores across race and class lines. To keep getting federal funding, schools have to have a certain percentage of their students pass the national assessments. But students can be made exempt from these tests if they're classified as disabled, which can lead to schools labeling marginal students as learning disabled to maintain the pass rate that they need to get funding. This is important because, as we discussed last week, the labels that schools give students often turn into self-fulfilling prophecies. A marginal student who's kept in the regular testing pool may be more likely to have teacher time and resources devoted to their improvement than one who's labeled as learning disabled. And this type of tracking is more common for minority students, which can contribute to racial gaps in educational achievement. More broadly, tracking can have long-term consequences for what kinds of opportunities are available to students or the choices that they make later in life. For example, boys are more likely to be tracked in higher-level math classes than girls are. This contributes to fewer women pursuing math-heavy careers like economics or engineering, which happen to be some of the more highly paid careers, meaning that tracking is one contributor to the gender pay gap. Ultimately, educational systems are grounded in the biases of the society that they're built within. And while our schooling system does a lot of good, social conflict theorists point out that its structural features, everything from taxes to cultural capital to standardized testing, can disadvantage minorities in ways that can perpetuate patterns of social inequality.